Hello everyone, again this is David Arlent, aka Chronic Pain Guy, calling to wish you a good weekend because I'm recording this on a Friday. And thankfully for Northeast Oregon, we're actually getting some rain right now, so hopefully that will get rid of the remainder of our forest fires. And please, God, Allah, Buddha, the Great Spirit, whoever holds power over such things, please send this rain south to our friends in California. So anyways, I'm going to be talking about a controversial topic. I'm going to also be reading a little bit from a script, just because it's kind of a lengthy topic. And I say controversial because it's one of those, is it really related to chronic pain? And that the thing I'm talking about is workers' compensation. And I have found, having been through the system myself and having been a nurse for 18 years, that I would say at least 25 to 50% of people who have chronic pain have been through the workers' compensation system in some form or another. And so that's why I decided that I would include this in my videos. In October of 2012, actually it was started previous, many months before, I became permanently disabled as a nurse. Trying to assist a patient getting turned in bed who was on a ventilator with a nursing assistant who was like his third day ever on the job. And so he was delaying and delaying, and unfortunately after a few minutes my back just couldn't take it anymore. I felt a pop pop and wound up with some herniated discs and a pinched and displaced nerve root. So that put me on the workers' compensation system, and let me tell you something. If you ever want to get back at your worst enemy, put them through the workers' comp system. It's from a night, it's for those of you, especially non-Americans, who are saying, what the hell is the workers' compensation system? Quite frankly and simply, it is a system in the United States that in theory is supposed to, when the worker is injured, it is supposed to compensate that worker until they either get better or, in some extreme cases, for the rest of their lives. If they wound up, say, with a broken neck and a paraplegic or quadriplegic, I should say. And I have taken care of one patient that was like that. Very sad. So anyway, how the workers' compensation works for most small and medium businesses, you pay a small fee to a company. In Oregon, it's called SAFE, S-A-I-F. And basically, they run like any insurance company. Somebody gets injured on the job, and that system pays for them to see a doctor, a physical therapist, get x-rays, go off for surgery if necessary, that sort of thing. However, for some medium and some large businesses, it works very differently. My oldest cat decided to pop in the room, so you might hear her moving around. What they get to do is they get to put a big pool of money into an account of sorts, and they usually will pay a claims management service, though some of the larger ones like a Nike or something like that will run their own out of their own departments, but most will pay a management service to administer the funds for you. And what they do is, while the worker is injured, they supposedly take the funds out of this little pool, and then they pay for, the doctor's fees and everything else. The way it works in reality is they pay doctors anywhere from $800 to $2,000 an hour to deny your claim or to put you on a Ferris wheel, so that while the money you should be getting as a settlement, that money they can play Russian roulette in the stock market. And this is how my attorney explained it to me. So while I was being injured and I was going to doctor after doctor after doctor, I think I ended up seeing a total of 9 doctors. And I would say I did at least 3 to 4 rounds of physical therapy, and a round is roughly 6 weeks. And they all kept saying the same thing to me: you can go back to work, you can go back to work, you can go back to work. Now, To give you an idea of the size or the intensity of this, a lot of these funds also will have an attorney. A lot of them get an attorney on the side for about $200 an hour. And then they also will have to pay for attorneys for me, like my attorney, and he got paid as a percentage of my settlement, and it was only 25%. And 25% ended up equaling, so because it's such a low payout, most attorneys do not go into workers' compensation. And he said for the area of Portland, Oregon, which is roughly 3 million people, there are a total of 7 workers' compensation attorneys. And so you can spend months and years on this never-ending cycle of deny, but I can't work, my back hurts, fix this for me. And then they'll give you a little TENS unit to put on your back, and let's go do some more stretching, and then, we'll just send you right back to work next Monday. Despite the fact that you have to take, a whole bag of pills, a mile long and a mile deep, and you still can't work, but they want you to work even though they know you're not safe. In fact, one of the doctors I challenged, because I happen to know him, I said, "Doctor, if I was to walk into your room with that list of medications and say, hey, I'm going to be your nurse, I want to take care of you, would you feel comfortable having me take care of you?" And his response was to turn around and walk out of the room, and he never answered me. So I want to disabuse people of this notion that workers' compensation is for the workers. Now, my case ended 7 years ago, or well over 7 years ago. The statute of limitations is over with. I am not trying to do this as a beg to rally the troops and give my former workplace a hard time, because quite frankly, there's no use, okay? So please don't, get upset at my former employer and try and contact them in any sort of way, because they're probably going to say, who are you talking about, Because my case ended roughly in 2012 or 2013. I think it was early 2013. Another thing also, too, if you are under the workers' compensation and you're still employed, you can collect workers' compensation and disability payments at the same time, which is something I did not know. Because under the workers' compensation system, the way it's supposed to work is they pay you 66 2/3% of your wages while you're disabled. And then because you don't pay taxes on it, that supposedly is a break-even point, which actually it's not. But that's almost a whole different story in and of itself. But what I found is when I called my permanent disability company, they're like, Mr. Arlen, you could collect both at the same time. So the first check that they sent me was for quite a large sum. It was like $16,000, because they had to pay me for a year of injury status, and then they had to pay me whatever the difference between, because I figured out the difference because I wasn't getting my weekend pay, my night shift pay, and everything else that a lot of nurses rely on. I was actually only getting about 42% under the workers' compensation system of real income that was coming into my pocket. So that was a nice check, but of course then that lowered my total payments, because then they take your workers' compensation, deduct it from your disability check, and that's what you get paid. So to give you an idea, most nurses, at least at that time, I was making about $90,000 a year, and I'm going to try and do this so that you can read it. But under my termination agreement with my former employer, Providence Health and Services, and if they want to sue me, they are more than welcome to try and do so. Under number 5, this was my payout. I'm hoping that you guys can see this. Okay, and it's under bullet point number 5. And basically what bullet point number 5 says is that the total sum that they are going to give me is going to employee $100 as consideration for employees' concessions and agreements as set forth in this document. So for 15 years of loyal service, I got $100. Now, to give you an idea of how that system is skewed against the worker, one of our CEO, actually our very first CEO that they hired on, because they had to have a CEO, hired this guy on. 14 months later, he supposedly hurt his back and had to be medically retired. Now, guess what he got for 14 months of service? He got, allegedly, in my opinion, from what I've heard from other people, he got roughly 12 million US dollars. So, $100 versus $12 million. So, that should hopefully give you an idea of how it's much skewed against the workers. Another thing that they do, you have to read the fine print very carefully on those things, because a lot of them only have a 2-year time limit on it. Some of the more expensive ones have 5 years, and the most expensive one at my employer lasted until the age of 65, which thankfully that's the one that I got, because I ended up being disabled at 40. And had I had a time limit of just 2 or 5 years, I would have been absolutely screwed. So luckily I got the expensive one that was until age 65, and luckily I had a doctor who, my primary care doctor was outside of the system, so he was good enough to sign my paperwork, and I was able to get my disability insurance, which I understand is actually quite rare. Most of the time you're going to end up having to fight your own doctor. And you're going to end up losing, either go back to work hurt or try and figure out a way to go back to school. Another thing that you're also going to learn in the United States, and another thing that quite shocked me about the system, was union contracts are no good under the workers' comp system. So I was actually on the union negotiations team that negotiated the last 3 contracts with my former employer. And so the guy who was our union rep was a good friend of mine, and he asked him, I said, you know, Rob, is there anything you can do to help me? And he's like, I'm sorry, David, there's nothing I can do. We just have to sit there and watch them roll on. And that's, in fact, what they did. They just watched while my former employer just rolled over on me. So what I can recommend to everybody, you know, number one is get an insurance agent who is good and can walk you through the system, because another thing I wish I would have gotten is like cost of living adjustments. But I would have had to have gotten a different policy, and so in reality, I'm a former nurse. I'm a little bit of a pain expert, but I'm not a insurance expert. So please, please, please get a hold of an insurance expert and really, really consider getting the most expensive policy you can possibly afford. So what I'd like to see in the comments, if you like this video, please share, like, and subscribe, is what your experience has been with the workers' compensation system. So, and also to have, if any of you know how to get a hold of the powers that be, because I've been a hold of both of Oregon's senators, and they all say that, yeah, they want to help me, but then when I call to leave my information, I never get a return call back. So if anyone, can direct me in the comments below how we can get a hold of the proper people, because they always say, oh, it's a state problem, oh, it's a federal problem, oh, we can't help you, oh, your union contract is no good. If people can, you know, get down in the comments and let people know how we can get a hold of our elected representatives to let them know what's going on. Anyways, my voice is about dried out, so I'm going to go drink some coffee and watch the rain as this uploads to YouTube, and I hope you all have a good weekend.